So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Roko and Michelle and our super special guest. I'm going to read because I do read because I don't have it memorized, even though it's in the back there, in your background, Carol. So our guest this week is Carol Burrell, President and CEO of Northeast Georgia Health System. Also, the system that Roko's working for. And so we're really excited to have you in the room. We're going to kick off with a quote, and it's your quote, Carol, which I love. And it's everything touches everything. And when I think about that, the topic that we're doing now is lessons in leadership. And when I think about this quote, what came to mind for me is this. Literally in process improvement, we do this is like you've got upstream impact, downstream impact of what's going on. And the other thing is the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, whatever that is, right? It's like literally we're all connected, and we need to realize it's from this siloed thinking that we can get ourselves into, literally that well-intentioned, I'm going to fix my stuff. But if we don't have visibility and awareness that my stuff's connected to other people's stuff, i.e. the system, we can inadvertently negatively impact someone else. And so there's so much value in realizing that everything touches everything. So don't burn those bridges. Be aware of the impact that you could have if you're benefiting your thing. And just be cognizant of the world that we live in the space that you're in, that it touches something else somewhere. So that's what I got. So Carol, welcome to the conversation. I appreciate the fact that this quote is your quote. And thank you for sharing it.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I'm excited and feel very honored to be participating for the invitation today. I love leadership development, developing myself, even continuing today. I thought by the time I got to this stage of my life and career, I would have it all wrapped up, but instead I just keep learning. And so it's something that, I feel very passionate about, again, for myself as well as my team. And, it's not always something that, people coming into the organization really want to embrace because of other cultures that they have come from. But it is something that time and time again, I eventually get thanked for doing it because it improves people's lives, not only at work, but at home as well. And so, but everything touches everything. That came about years ago. I was supporting a new leader who had joined the organization. And his style was a bit different from mine. I'd been with the organization for a long time and had really deep relationships and really had the history and the understood how this community and this health system worked. And, every community is a little bit different. Every organization is a little bit different. But this individual kind of had ideas of his own and really was not relationship oriented. And he had some great ideas. And you actually framed it up really well when you say people sometimes want to fix or deal with what they can see with inside of their line of sight without any regard for what that might look like to others. And so I found myself always coming back with well, if you do that, then this is what's going to happen. And then he'd come back with something else. I'd say, well, then that's what's going to happen. So hence evolved, everything touches everything. And it is evident throughout this organization, Roko can tell you, and even in this community. So maybe that's what I will part with one day. But it is so true because, even if you, it's not that you should shy away from making a certain decision because of the things that may happen, good or bad, but you have to be thoughtful enough to weigh those consequences out to guide you in making the decision, but also in how you communicate and implement a particular decision, and know that there are going to be things that you're going to have to explain. I'm big on the why. Why am I making this decision? And getting as much information from a variety of people. When we get into positions that I'm in, it's not necessarily what you yourself do, other than know that you are trustworthy, you have respect, and that, you know, you're predictable, I like to say, but it's how you conduct that orchestra. I feel like my job is really conducting that symphony, and or the orchestra to play the symphony. And I just have to assure that we're all in the same key and aligned, as we're moving forward to advance the organization and this community.
I love that analogy. Roko, go ahead.
I know. So many things I have like layered questions. I'll try not to rapid fire you with them.
Go back to Margie Hagney. It's one at a time.
So one at a time. So I love that everything touches everything, and there's so many things that you can tie that to as a leader. But what was the thing that helped you realize that everything touches everything was something you wanted to develop your leaders in, because it helped you manage your role and the organization in that way?
Oh, I don't know that I can have it really name any one particular instance. It really evolved out of my style, my leadership style. I have a experience in working with physician groups, and earlier in my career, I had the opportunity to get some really hard lessons when you thought that somebody understood and you had communicated, and then the ramification that had on an individual. And then candidly, I have shovels in my office from groundbreaking. I kiddingly have said I've had to use that shovel to clean up some other people's messes. If
on purpose shovel.
Yeah, it's you see how other people have not thought things through, and I realize sometimes you can overthink things, you can overanalyze, and it's a balance, but and it's not going to always be perfect. But we went through as an organization back in the early 2000s, 2004 and 5, we went through a transition period. We had a new leader in. We had huge visions for growth, and we were running a 1% operating margin.
Ooh.
And needless to say, you can't invest on a 1% operating margin. And so we made the decision that we needed to go through basically a cost reduction effort. It actually had a name. And so we really looked at it. We sat around the table and said, okay, here's what this is going to take. Now, bear in mind that the CEO that was there at the time, I was COO, was following a 40-year CEO who had done great things. But as you might imagine, there were some sacred cows and some things that had always been done that way. And so we looked ourselves in the eyes and said, if the right thing for us to do is to invest in this organization and build it, then we're going to need to take some cost out. And that involved ultimately reducing costs by 25 million. It resulted in having to do a reduction in force. Lots of policies changed. A lot of things changed. But what I think that we did so well through that is we communicated the why on the front end in order for us to be successful as an organization. And we're the #1 employer in our region. And we touch a lot, not just in providing healthcare, but as an economic engine for this region. And we explained what that was going to take to be successful, to the point that there were some very tenured staff who did end up leaving the organization. And 2 individuals who were leaders came back and said, I know this affected me personally, but I understand why, and it is the right thing to do for the organization. One of the individuals actually even wrote a book about it, which was pretty emotional, and what it meant to him, and the way we conducted it, how we had to go through that. So, those are just a couple of, thoughts as to where I realized that, you know, you really do have to communicate a message. And again, when other people have not thought things through, and I've had to come in and do the patchwork. So it's just easier for everybody to do the best they can on the front end to think through those things.
And I think it really speaks to you shared offline a couple of quotes. Sorry, Michelle. You shared offline a couple of quotes with us, and I think it speaks to that second quote. Do you want to share your second quote with us around courage?
Sure. Courage is very important to me, and I love Winston Churchill's quote of, "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen."
Yeah. And so when you were telling that story about the growth and being able to communicate that why, it took courage because you were having to make tough choices and you knew about those tough choices, but to be able to share it with others and then listen, right, to what they were saying and, you know, have conversations about that, because you can't move people forward through the acceptance phase of some change you're presenting unless they can work through all of those, what's in it for me, my fears about what this change brings. And so having that courage both to share it in that way, but then also to listen and have difficult conversations with people as they try and rationalize it and internalize it. Sorry,
Right.
Michelle, didn't want to cut you off, but I love that.
But you did it anyway. Go, Roko. It's so funny, Roko and I, we've stepped on each other a number of times in all this because our brains get excited and so do our mouths. The thing I appreciated, Carol, what you were talking about and sharing that story is I'm going to go back to everything. What is everything touches everything? Because my brain goes to everything's connected to everything else, right? It's like this vast network of all things. Is that when you talk about, and I think it's any situation, so it was the change management you went through, the organization needs to be able to move forward. In order to move forward, we need to drop anchor or let go of anchor on some other things that are holding us back. So to your point, a 1% operating margin, there's no room for anything. No. Unless for some reason you're the size of a Costco and you can operate on that kind of a margin. Right. But when I think about that, it's like if everything's connected or everything touches everything else, it's looking around at what's going to be the impact to everyone in this decision we're going to be making. Who are those biggest impacted? And the other part of the connection piece, which I think is so vital, is you guys were really clear on the fact that here's our strategy to move forward. And in order to do what we need to do to support the community we're in and continue to support the organization so it thrives, this is the stuff that we need to do. And we understand and appreciate the sacrifice that it's going to be and the change that it's going to be for some people in the organization. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times leaders, and this may not be the case, but there seems to be a perception that the view that they have in a decision is very myopic. Mm-hmm. And that they're not factoring in everything else that you're talking about. And sometimes that could be because when you look at everything touches everything else, there's this empathy, humanness side of it, right? That makes it really hard to make some decisions because people's lives are impacted. Mm-hmm. And so it could be some leaders do this so they don't have to acknowledge the rest of the story, if you will. Right. But there's power in the momentum that you got and the support that you got over recognizing the beginning, the entirety of it. Mm-hmm. So I just, I appreciate that.
I'll give you another example. You'll see themes over the years. And not that I take credit for it, but this is an incredible organization that has such a legacy, and we are fortunate to be in the market we're in. Mm-hmm. Because it is a growth market and it's where people desire to come, and we have the trust of the community, to care for their health. Mm-hmm. And in some cases that's not just their physical health, but it's the quality of life that they experience. Mm-hmm. Because we have a $4.2 billion impact in
Mhm.
this region. So
Yes.
again, everything touches everything. But one thing that I'm particularly, proud of, I guess, is we went through some difficult times in 2019, and some disruption in one of our service lines. We were out of network with Anthem for 97 days. I can tell you that was, when they say lonely at the top, that was probably the time that I really, really felt lonely, because I knew I had to make a decision that was going to be the right for the long term of this organization and this community. Yet I knew that we were impacting people's lives. But coming out of that, that's a story unto itself. But then we enter 2020 and COVID hits.
COVID. That would be
Yeah.
COVID.
That would be COVID. So nothing to snap you out of feeling kind of sorry for yourself for having gone through what you just went through than a pandemic. But leading up to that, for the past probably couple of years, we had been we're always in a strategic planning process, but we had been looking, we were over capacity here, on our Gainesville campus, had been. And again, we are today a 5-hospital system. At that point in time, we were just 3. Oh no, let's see, 3, I think it was 3 or 4. Anyway, I lose track. But anyway, we had been planning. And so here we are in the midst of COVID. The world is in a crisis. They don't know what we're doing. And here we are in the midst of planning projects that were around $2 billion. Here on the main campus, it was in excess of 500 million, which was, as you imagine, a big deal. And I had leadership on our team, as well as some board level leadership that wanted just to shut everything down and stop all planning. Don't spend another dime. Don't spend any money. And we had a lot of debate about that, because even though we didn't know what the crystal ball was going to be, we knew that there would be we would get on the other side. We certainly didn't know what the other side was going to look like, but we made a very courageous decision, which was to keep doing the planning, modify it in some ways, certainly pace the timing of it, but let's continue that planning, because we know if we needed it before COVID, we certainly will need it after COVID. And so we looked up and looked out and continued that planning, and thank goodness we did. Took a really, really long, courageous view. And we played out all kinds of scenarios, and again, made the decision that was the right thing to do for the community and for the organization. And as a result of that, we are on the other side, and we are thriving. And, had it not gone that well, there would have been other decisions to make, but you look at what you want to do. And so there again, it's having the courage to really look to do what you believe is the right thing, and having other people there. You can't be lonely in that.
No.
We have a lot of, it's not any one individual, it's not any one person. And sometimes, everybody's not going to agree, but you've got to get at least enough of I say consensus, but certainly support and understanding it. And then everybody has to go shoulder to shoulder, and this is what we're doing. So we've had, those experiences, firsthand.
Yeah.
Carol, tell us a little bit about relationships, because a theme through all of your examples, I think, are the relationships that you've built with either your direct team or the board or the community. Tell us a little bit about what relationships mean to you and your view of those, because I think that's a core theme for new leaders to learn about. As they move into leadership and practice leadership.
Yeah. Gosh, where to start on that? Well, I'm an approachable, personable, I think. individual.
You are the people's leader. I mean, like, they talk about the Pope, and I'm not Catholic, but they always talk about this one Pope being the people's the Pope of the people. You are the president of the people here in Northeast Georgia.
Well,
You're the only person the only CEO that I know, no matter where we are, people will come up to you, community members, patients, I mean, staff. Carol, are you going to be at church this Sunday? Or Carol, were you at that barbecue? You just are the people's choice. I mean, it just, so I'll zip it and you go on.
yeah, well, I think, you know, it's, you know, how your upbringing, you know, I am the oldest of three girls. Neither of my parents went to high school, finished high school. And I really wanted a college degree. So I'm still very grounded, that I am, despite my title, I am still Carol. And my friends and my certainly my family, my sister, helps keep me grounded, you know, along with my kids. But I've also, you know, learned over the years that if you have a relationship that is, again, where people trust you. You know, I've had members of my team in the past who thinks it's all, when they define it, it's all about relationships. But how they, I guess, define that is that they play golf together and they're friendly. And so that's supposed to create it. I have found that in a leadership role that strong relationships aren't necessarily about making everybody happy. It's about being that they know they can trust you, that they can respect you, that you know, that you'll deliver the hard message, but you can always be you know, predictable, if you will, in how you go about, you know, decisions, and acknowledging what their and the impact that a decision may have on somebody. And again, in that why, I seem to have all these stories coming out of the back of my head now.
That's what happens.
Yeah. So several years ago, the organization had to make a decision about a particular governance structure that would have separated out one of our specialty groups. So we have a very large multi-specialty group that has all kinds of specialties. And then we have this unique venture for just cardiology. And we were really trying to understand how to streamline that structure. What was the right thing to do? What was the best way to do it? And you can imagine the kinds of personalities in those type of specialties, and everyone thinking that, you know, their way was the right way. So I talked to a lot of different folks, a lot of different stakeholders, and got their viewpoint, explained the things that I was managing, and what were the things that I was considering. And as you might imagine, there were some people on one side of the fence and other people on the other side of the fence. At the end of the day, I did make the decision with board support. And there were a couple of physicians who were friends of mine who came to me and said, Carol, you listened to me, and you know that the decision you've made is not necessarily the one that I would have made, but I trust that you see a bigger picture, that you gathered information and you know things that I don't know, and that I support you and will do everything I can to make this successful. That was probably one of the most defining moments in my career. And, you know, you don't get that by doing that one thing. It's something that is built over time, and it's not big things. It's not the big hoorahs. It's the 1% things, and people constantly look. I mean, as a leader, you're always on stage. People are always looking, sometimes too much.
Yeah.
But you know, it's that consistency and that steadfastness, not that they're going to agree with everything, but that they trust that you are going to get all of the perspectives and then make the best decision based on the information at hand.
Carol, when I listened to you, the word consistency came to mind, but you have to realize, and I'm sure you realize, people listening, is that you can be consistently a jerk. So
Yeah.
it's not about it's consistency in the air quote right way. And what I hear is people feel heard because you are listening, right? And not the fact that, it's not a popularity contest, but it's respect for people. I'm going to listen to your perspective. I'm going to take it in. And to their point, you have a seat at different tables than they have a seat at, i.e. you're going to have access to different information than different people have. But the recurring undertone that I hear about you is that you freaking care about people. And so I go back to the quote that's I think John Maxwell or somebody is where I heard it, is that people don't care about what you have to say until they know how much you care. And because you lead with that, right? That I care, you matter, this matters. I'm going to show up consistently respectful, honest. This is the path that I'm going to take. You're going to be heard. There's going to be a forum for that. Then people can respect the decision that you make because they know there's no hidden agendas. And that's what I hear.
I think that sums it up well. And, it's not like I wake up every morning and think conscientiously, okay, I'm going to go, because I care about people, this is what I'm going to do. It just has to be a part of your inner being, and that emotional intelligence and, that servant heart is what kind of frames all of that up.
It's powerful. If you look back on your career, because you've been at Northeast Georgia Health System for a minute, right?
Yeah.
If you look back on your career, what is something that you look back and you're like, that was like one of my proudest moments?
Gosh, I get that question quite a bit. And I, of course, there's been so much that has come about. I really think that I would encapsulate it in seeing where we are today as an organization, and all of the trials and the tribulations and the successes that we've experienced that has advanced the organization and candidly helped to grow this community. People move here because of healthcare and recreational. It's a big retirement area. And now we're getting a lot of younger families because it's a great place to raise kids. And I feel
that's
like
always great for payer mix.
Yes, it is for sure. And so I think that I think that just reflecting over all of that, involvement and making, there's been so many decisions over the years. And candidly, Michelle, any one of those decisions or situations would be a significant milestone in any person's career. And to think that, we did build that tower back in, in the early 2000s. We did build a greenfield hospital when nobody was building hospitals. And then just the continued advancement. It has just been, it's been an incredible journey, and, one that there has been a lot of people who have seen more in me than I saw in myself very early on, but had a lot of faith and trust and, collaboration to make it happen. So it's certainly a team of people. It's not just me. It's not any one individual.
Yeah, no, you've created the space for them to be able to be who they are. Yeah. Roko.
Yeah, I was gonna just another question, just again, because I'm always thinking about the people who are watching the podcast. But when you think about mentors or books or things that may have shaped you over the years, what could you share with the viewers around that? Like, was there a particular mentor that showed you or told you something, or a coach or a book that you'd want to share with folks about lessons in leadership?
There's several things. early in my career, as a medical technologist, which I only did that for like 2.5 years, but a pathologist, Dr. Matthew Patterson, really gave me an opportunity to go, asked me to go do a project. I won't elaborate the details, but here I was young. I'd never done anything like that before. And so I nervously, did it, reported back to him. About 2 years later, he called me because I had left at that point, and he called me and offered me a job to start up this particular company. And he said, "Do you know why I called you?" And I said, "No, I was wondering that." And he said, "I remember that project that you did. And, it wasn't that, I knew you were nervous. I knew you were anxious, but, you came back, you did what I asked you to do and acknowledged what you didn't know and what you did know." And boy, that was just very, that resonated with me about people are always looking. And you just never know how one thing is going to lead to another.
Yeah.
I've had a number of mentors, coaches, that have helped me through, some difficult times. One of my favorite books is Courage by Gus Lee, because it just gets down to like really the nitty gritty of relationships and communication and the values. Those things are what you need in difficult times. And, I wish that I had gotten more of my, more of that personal development at a much younger age. I think it would have saved me a lot of heartache over the years, but nonetheless, that's really important. And I love the British. I love the Queen and the Princess Diana. I love all of that.
Yeah.
So one of my things is actually Queen Elizabeth, in a story that was relayed. If you read the book or if you've watched The Crown, where she was really upset that her parents did not have her more educated around worldly things, but they had really made sure that she did understand relationships and trust and integrity. And, through some very difficult times early as a young queen, that's what she went back to. And so that just, and we see all the things that she went through over the course of her tenure. So, that's resonated with me. And for the life of me, I'm blanking on her name right now. Maybe you can remember it, but she ended up heading the Washington Post. Meryl Streep played her in the movie, and I apologize again.
Huffington.
This is what
Is it
What was
Huffington? Huffington? No.
No, it'll come to me in a minute.
And we'll put it in the notes.
Yes.
Put it in the notes. Yes. Sorry about that. But anyway, she was a stay-at-home mom. Her dad had started the Washington Post, but women didn't lead in roles like that, and her husband ended up passing away, and so she stepped in, and of course all the stalwarts there were trying to tell her what to do. And so when it came down to the difficult decision of Watergate, and she went back to what was the mission of the paper and what was the right thing to do, she gathered input from her naysayers and her confidants, and she made the decision that now lives on. And so that really, I guess, more than guided me was affirmation that I was doing some things the way that others who had been successful did them.
Well, that's it. And when you talk about just leadership, it's not about you having all the answers.
No.
It's about you being connected to people who have different perspectives. And you need that. You need all the different touch points and different perspectives. Even though the ownership of the final decision rests with you, there's a responsibility to understand what am I not seeing? What is the rest of the story here that I'm not factoring in right now?
Right. And you have to create an environment, and this is a struggle. It's probably easier for me because I do have the long history and, that the reputation, but you have to create an environment, a safe place for people to share things that you don't necessarily want to hear.
Yep.
I've told many of my executives over the years, I'm not paying you to make sure that I'm happy or to feel good. I'm paying you to give me your perspective, and let me weigh that in. And I've been, I'm always honest about being confidential. If you may tell me something, I said, I can't be everywhere. I don't, I need eyes and ears there. And you know me well enough to know that where you might have it, I wonder what Carol would think about that. I wonder if she knows that. I need you to share that with me. I don't have a history of doing knee jerk or reacting unless it's something that is fraudulent. And so I take that, and over the years, time after time, it always works out. Somebody will share something with me and I file it away, and it never fails to connect to something, other information that comes along the way. So I digress. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but.
Well, no, it's the whole connection and information and people, and creating that safe space to where people can come and not think that you're just going to your point, go directly to XYZ. But decades ago, there was a leader that told me that when you hear information as a leader, don't, unless to your point it's fraudulent or some life is at stake.
Right.
Don't take an action based on that, other than put yourself in a position to observe for yourself what's going on, what's happening. But you need those connections, because otherwise you don't know where, especially the further up the food chain you go and the span of responsibility you have, you're further away from what's actually happening on the front line, which is where the transactions happen at a pretty frequent rate.
Right.
So how do you stay connected to that and not pull yourself into the minutia of it, but understand where, as you're flying along going, hey, Houston, do we have a problem?
Right.
But that's how, and it's to develop the relationships and the connections to be able to do that. So I freaking appreciate this time. Roko has said so much about you that's positive, and now I know why.
Oh, I appreciate
that. I'm going to call you a breath of fresh air, Carol, in the sea of CEOs and presidents that are out there. Because for me, through all the successes you've had in your career, you're very grounded. You're very grounded in who you are, and that speaks volumes about who you are. So I appreciate the time in the room with you. So as we're wrapping this up, leadership sound bites and lessons in leadership, what are 1 to 2 things that you would love people to take away from your lessons in your leadership journey?
I think it's what I made reference to earlier, is I really encourage certainly young leaders, but all leaders, to understand what your development plan is, to not have a blind eye to it just because you've achieved a title or a certain level. Because, it's like anytime you change, you change one member of a team, you got a new team. You change role, and so again, as I shared earlier, I wish that I had more coaching and that really profiling, regardless of what it was, and understood what it meant earlier in my career. But, I was coming up in a time when it was still a bit of the, pardon the expression, but the good old boys network. And, so I had to, kind of persevere through that. So I think that would have made my development a lot better. But as a result, I did get some really good experiences of what to do, but more importantly, what not to do. What kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of leader did I want to be?
Mhm.
And yeah, those lessons of observation of what not to do and
Mhm.
seeing those is really, really important.
Mhm.
And again, I think that just reflecting on experiences and when new people come into an organization, as a leader, you change organizations, and you bring experience. Recognize that that is your experience, and it's not because your previous employer did it a certain way.
Mhm.
There's, you have new people that can join sometimes. Well, this is the way they did it at such and so. I
Yeah.
don't care. Bring your experience and assess the role that you're in with a different organization, and then apply that experience. But it's not because somebody else did it that way somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. No, that's like one of the biggest pet peeves for people. Is, well, it's such and such. This is how we did it. Well, you're
Like,
not at
hello.
such and such anymore.
Right.
Take a look at the rest of the story here. Yeah,
Yes.
good call out. Roko, what's on your mind?
Okay, so I got two. One goes back to the first quote about everything touches everything, and it's something that we've said in previous podcasts as well, Michelle, and that is getting the fingerprints of others or the voices of others. It's really key, and it's something that everyone can practice, and it's practicing true systemness, making sure that you're slowing down and asking for different perspectives so that before you form a complete decision, you have gotten those fingerprints of others and understood to your stories, Carol, what are the risks? What are the implications of us making the various possible decisions? So it's getting the fingerprints of others or voices of others. And then the other one that I just loved was this idea that your leaders are always on stage. So be consistent in who you are as a leader. So Bill, if your thing is I need to build trust, or if your thing is I need to be a servant leader, or I need to be humble, whatever it is that you're trying to do, be consistent and realize you are on stage. People are always looking, even when you don't think that they're looking, because you're impacting somebody's experience, or which is going to form some belief about you in how you show up, whether you are aware of it or not. So
yes,
Yeah.
and giving them confidence, not just in you, but in times of crisis, they want to know that their leader is somebody that they can count on.
Yes. Yeah. Michelle and I had, not to get off on another tangent, but we talked about that, about being in crisis. And it was this idea of hope, in that leaders are looked at to bring that idea of hope in crisis, right? Because otherwise, then you're just in chaos, and it's easy to spiral out of control if your leaders at the top don't have that message of hope. So I love that.
Yeah.
It's so funny because, hey, Carol.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know we're trying to wrap it up, but that reminds me, during COVID, I did a number of town halls, and, my stomach was in knots, but I tried not to portray that. And I can't tell you how many people have come up since then and said how that just helped them be able to get, one foot in front of the other.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, good. I'm glad I didn't show exactly what I was feeling, but you're there for a bigger reason.
Yes.
Well, you are. It's and that was one of the things. Is I remember working with leaders through COVID, in a different health system. And it was one of those things that, yes, you need to be transparent with people, but you also need to give them hope.
Right.
And part of that can be is just your own belief that this too shall pass. To your point, we're going to get on the other side of it. Because a lot of people, fear can take over and grip people's brains, and then you no longer are creatively thinking, you're not doing anything else. So it helps for someone to shine the flashlight and go, this way, it's over here.
Exactly.
For me, I think the thing that stands out for me, Carol, and just listening to you through your leadership journey, there is a clarity in how you lead. And you lead with your heart. There's so much heart and caring about people. And I don't want people to get confused about that because you do that, you're not strong, because there is a strength in you that radiates. And but it's not this harsh kind of thing. There's this magical blend that you have around caring about people and leading with heart and being consistent and honest and truthful and respectful, and yet not shying away from decisions that have to be made that maybe don't agree with people that you have relationships with. And yeah, courage is one of those things, but there's this solid strength in you that I encourage people to tap into. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a jerk, because you're doing it just with the heart and the caring that you have about the people that you're serving. And so for me, that's one of the things I think that stands out in getting to know you in this short period of time. It could be considered like speed dating. But I appreciate that. I mean, it just freaking radiates. So I appreciate your time. Roko, I always appreciate time in the room with you. This is Leadership Soundbites with Carol and Roko and Michelle. And please like, share, subscribe. And until next time, we appreciate you. So thank you.